Sylvester Thompson's my name. For the last 7 or 8 years, I am a contract IT consultant, systems administration, network administration, and now doing cloud services. I've been in the industry going back to the very late 80s, so I've got about a 31, 32 year track record, starting with DOS 2.0, and I have worked my way up, literally crawled through the mud in the last 30 years. So I've done both application support, I've done desktop support, I've done training, end user support. I've done just about everything in the industry except code. That part of my brain just doesn't work very well.
So, how did you get your initial start in IT? Like, how did that process all happen? When and why did you choose IT?
Well, it started like a lot of kids coming out of college, not really having a good idea of what, direction wise, what it is that I wanted to do. I had a part-time job at a government agency. It had this thing that just kind of sat in the corner. It was an old Zenith PC. I think the thing booted off of dual floppy disk. Have a hard drive at that time. Um, and I just kind of started playing with it and reading the manuals and just kind of dinking around with it. And I guess I was a little bit of a geek back in those days. And one thing led to another. The thing that, even back then in '87, I think it was, the thing that most attracted me to PC, even if I didn't really know what it was or what was going on, I had enough good sense to realize that it was going to be huge. And the people who invested in themselves and invested in their own learning and at that technology would be substantially ahead in their career. And what I've been able to do is to leverage that and to make a really nice career for myself over the last 30 years. Um, and that basically is the story. I had the foresight to recognize the next big thing, and I just dived in right at the forefront, and I just rode the wave.
That's awesome. So, what was your first job technically then?
Actually, the job was working with a health agency. I was a statistician, so it wasn't really, in the truest sense, a technology job. It We were using oh gosh, Lotus 123 and the old D base 3, and basically I was crunching demographic statistics. Um, at that time for sexually transmitted diseases for the Florida Department of Health. Um, and the thing of it is that we were using these applications. Lotus 123 back in those days was, I mean, there. I think Microsoft's word processor was like on version one. Excel at that time, Microsoft Excel only ran on the Macintosh platform. They didn't. I mean, this is going back to like the Fred Flintstone days. Um, so Windows was only actually Windows wasn't even available. But anyway, we were running these desktop applications, Lotus 123, uh, but the DBase, I believe it was Ashton Tate was the publisher of DBase 3. And we export these files to an old ASCII format. I pull them up into 123, and I started dinking with formulas and making spreadsheets and charts and things of that nature. My employer sent me to some training. I got really good at it. As organizations and industry started to adopt PC back again at the very late 80s, being one of the people that had the knowledge of how these things work. Well, the next career evolution, well, gee, I'll just get a job teaching other people how to do this. And then that kind of led to a training background where we'd have a lab, and I go in and I show people this is a computer, this is a keyboard, this is a mouse. We talk about all the fundamentals, start doing some basic stuff, basic applications, how to build formulas, uh, spreadsheets, and things like that. And as the technology and the software providers got more mature in their products, I just continued to do that for a period of years. kind of got tired of it, standing on your feet, being in a kind of a lecture format. Um, I had this great idea. Hey, this thing called networking would be a really good thing. And Novell, I believe, I mean, started doing that. The whole client server thing, period of years. And again, just staying, just being very fortunate to be at the very forefront of whatever the next big thing was. Um, and sometimes, guess if you guessed wrong, they kind of had some negative career impacts. A good example would be OS2 with IBM. I worked in a data center where half the team is like, okay, you guys are going to pilot OS2, you other guys are going to pilot this new Microsoft Windows thing. I landed on the Windows side of the team, and nobody remembers what OS2 was or what it did.
Yeah.
So again, it's just being right at, if not the very cutting edge of technology, being right in that next or second line generation, being in the right place at the right time. And currently now, I work for a managed service provider, doing some Azure bills, and doing enterprise level support. Um, I have the good fortune of being able to work 100% remotely these days. So it certainly had some benefits and advantages.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's definitely a great story. Like I love hearing that. That's cool. So what advice do you have for others who are looking to get into IT?
Well, firstly, don't be afraid to pull yourself out of your own comfort zone. Um, there are certain skills that I think are very consistent, regardless of platform. Um, One thing, you got to know some Linux. Um, I think most people's first exposure to technologies from a consumer standpoint. Oh, you get a laptop, or a smart tablet device. But having been out in corporate America, one of the things that I've noticed is that about 60% of all commercial enterprises and or websites that I've worked on, and I worked with a lot of companies whose names you'd recognize, Linux pretty much rules the desktop, 60 to 70% market share. So if you're going to make any inroads career wise, you've got to at least be comfortable with Linux. You probably want to be familiar with some sort of automation or scripting language. You don't have to be a coder or a programmer, but you got to be at least comfortable at a command prompt, being able to at least understand syntactically some of the scripting languages, PowerShell, Python, whatever the tool is. Those would be two things, and you got to always approach it. Lastly, with an open, expansive mind, you've got to be willing to learn. One of the good things about IT is that every 5 to 7 years, there's always going to be a new thing. So there's a constant learning process, whether it be in certification classes, just making the commitment to learn the technology or platform that you're interested in. The flip side of that is that it always changes every 5 to 7 years. I once did as a quick calculation. If I took all the money that I'd spent on certification classes, training, and that my employers and providers had spent, yeah, I probably could have went to medical school instead of being a technologist. But it's a constant process of learning and reinventing yourself. And if you're not prepared to do that, you probably want to give some thoughts to getting involved with it.
Awesome. I want to ask you a question based off of your answer there. You said you see 60% Linux and the desktop side, so you're saying end users are
I don't know, desktop, or I'm sorry, in the applications and enterprise side.
okay. Okay.
Just the opposite.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify on that, just to be sure.
Yeah, but most people, I mean, if you go to your big box retailers, you're not going to pull a Linux box off the shelf in pop, So once you start working in the industry, that was kind of an exposure an eye-opening thing. You know, I thought I was doing great stuff when I had, 100 servers running Microsoft 2000 or Server 2008. Then you go into an environment where you've got 1,000 Linux Red Hat servers running. So just the scalability, the bigness of it, and it's just a huge opportunity that I think a lot of people initially would overlook. But just in terms of career longevity, uh, it's I believe it's well worth it.
Well, I mean, Linux is everywhere at this point. I mean, it just
But
keeps
it's
growing,
everywhere, but everybody doesn't get a chance to see it,
right? It's
especially
funny
from
that
the consumer side.
I've worked in the field about 17 years, and it wasn't until 2 years ago where I came across my first Linux server in an environment that I was working in.
Yeah, they are all over the place. They're like cockroaches; you can't get rid of
Yeah, right.
them. Well, maybe that's not such a great analogy. But
No, I get it. It's good. So what does your current day to day in your current role look like? Like, what types of tasks and things do you find that
well,
you're doing?
I'm attached to a global team, uh, so everybody works remotely. So we start our call off, our morning off, every morning on an 8:30 team chat, Microsoft Teams. What's in the pipeline as far as server bills, support issues, architecture issue, I can never say that word, architectural issues in our environment. We have multiple lines of businesses that I support, both government as well as private sector service companies, insurance providers, healthcare companies, and things of that nature. So basically, you spend a lot of time collaborating and chatting with people, much like you and I are doing right now. And then within that global team, there's a subset of people who are stateside that we work with. You go into the Azure cloud. We use Microsoft's Azure as our cloud platform service, and from within that, we can deploy again Linux, and we've got various flavors of Linux distributions. Red Hat Enterprise being probably the most commercially viable, or certainly one of them. Ubuntu, and there are a couple of others that are out there, as well as all of the variants of Microsoft Server. So you get a build sheet from your customer. Okay, I need a server. I need X amount of so many processors, X amount of memories, steady state drives, blase, blase, blase. You build a server as you normally would. You stand it up, you provision it with all of your uh, internet security protocols, internet security tools, semantic, other intrusion um, prevention things. You group it, you put your groups in and users and accesses, and then you turn that over to the client. And it's a rinse, wash, repeat cycle. The great thing about using a cloud service is that it gives you the ability to deploy dozens of servers very quickly. So the scalability is there. So I spend most of my days working in very large uh, data centers or very large enterprises. That wasn't always the case, but that's kind of where I'm at now.
When you're standing up one of these like Azure servers, are you taking that process all the way through until it's deliverable to the customer, or you said you work with a team? So is there a point where like you're passing something off for somebody else to kind of take care of? To
Yeah, various, again, working with different governmental agencies, there's certain restricted policies. You've got to either be a U.S. citizen or be domiciled here in the States. So that cuts off about two-thirds of our support team. Um, so basically, yeah, you get the build documents that specify exactly what it is you're doing, what subnet you're going to be working on. You build it, you provision it, uh, and once it's stood up and it's been patched and it's at a state of operational functionality, then you just sign that over to deliver it to the end user, who will then either be some developer and or other system administrators on site or on premise at the client site. So, and I guess it's kind of the ITIL model where everything's siloed. You got very specific roles and responsibilities. The people who build the servers aren't necessarily the people who manage them on a day-to-day basis.
Awesome.
Uh, so normally the changeover process happens right after I've done the current patching. Even though we use Microsoft's Azure, they don't always do such a great job of having the most up to date.
Uh,
There's nothing.
Shocker.
Tuesday
I'm
is a real
shocked.
thing. Yeah, really, right?
Yeah. Oh man.
So that's it. And you could probably that process that I described. Um, I've been a contractor for since the very late, well, 2012, so 7 years. Worked on dozens of projects and client in all sorts of industry sectors, and that process is pretty much repeated, very consistent throughout. Um, so whether you're working at IBM, an HP, um, any other big technology company that you could name, there's certain things that always or seem to be very consistent and pretty much stay the same.
Awesome. Um, do you have certifications? I didn't even ask you this before.
I had them in years past with like versions prior to 2003. I had like a Microsoft Windows certification. Had an early 2003 server certification, but over the years, I just haven't bothered to renew them. Cost being a big issue. It again every 5 years you're constantly reinvesting. There are opportunities where I'll take a certification class, but I won't necessarily, or nor have I really found it even necessary to go through and get the actual cert. Everybody would probably, lots of people would tell you that that's kind of an exception to the rule, but in the marketplace, one of the things that I found is that HR managers tend to be very impressed with certifications in your resume. uh, but if you're seeking employment outside the W-2 model, just from observation, it tends not to be as big a driver. Uh, Most of the project man, oh, you've done this, you've worked with these guys, yeah, okay, you're hired.
Yeah.
They tend to be more concerned about rate more so than the certification credentials.
Right.
And on that note, I can share a story. Back in the 2000s, I was working. My neighbor was a roofer. He liked to dink, and he was a construction guy, and had the misfortune falling off the roof, broke his back. After rehab, he went back, and the doctor said, "Oh, you can never go back to roofing." So he took a test, and I said, "Hey, you like to fix things, and you know what? You'd be a real good computer technician." So he goes off and he takes the Microsoft certification classes, and he says, "Hey, Sly, guess what? I'm an MCSE now." I'm like, okay. So there's, and I certainly, and not to diminish the accomplishment, but there are lots of certifications that are out there. You've got to be very judicious in terms of where you spend your time, and most particularly where you spend your money. Um, so you just kind of got to make that very calculated business decision. So with that, you can kind of make whatever it is that you want. I am in the process of prepping to pursue a Linux certification. So just to kind of balance my own skill set out, which is probably about 80% Microsoft centric. Uh, but adding the familiarity and the diversity of skills with the Linux, it makes for a much longer career path.
Yeah. Definitely. I definitely can agree with that.
Also, too, on a side note, the Linux essays make a little bit more per hour than do the Microsoft.
Yeah,
So
that's a good thing too.
there are definitely some benefits to having them. I tend not to give people advice or tell them what to do, but if they can learn from my experiences, then I think that might be helpful.
Yeah.
Especially I've got kids, and it's like, well, okay, your dad's not gonna tell you what to do, but here's what happened when I had that experience, and
Right.
this is how it panned out. And I think people tend to learn better by perspective.
Hmm.
So I think in that respect, it's an excellent teaching mechanism.
Yeah. I always try to give as much as possible like open-ended answers and reprompt people because I can't tell somebody what path to take. I can't tell somebody what certification or what degree program to go through. Like ultimately, like they have to take that time and understand what it is that they're doing. And I try to get that through to them the best that I can. Because I mean, honestly, I see far too often people just, they want you to tell them what to do. And you can't live your life by other
That's what,
people
and
telling
the
you what
thing
to do.
is too, I find, especially in terms of that certification track, I mean, you really don't know the things that you don't know. I mean, if that makes any kind of sense.
Yeah,
Um, and for a while, I kind of developed kind of a certain cynicism, um, just in terms of like the only people that were making money out of the certifications were the people who were actually given the certificate, administering the tests. I mean, people literally are mortgaging it's their futures, to pay for $7,000 or $10,000 certification tract, and it's like, well, that's all well and good, but at some point you've got to put your feet on the ground, dig your heels in, and actually start working. You've got to get some
right.
real experiences. And for me, being a contractor, which typically, and as I see the American workforce and certainly the knowledge economy moving in that direction, and I think it already has to a very substantial degree. Working with different providers, for me personally, I work, 9 to 10 months out of the year. Um,
Solid.
and then you go on to the next opportunity. And that's just kind of the nature of the beast. Um, so for the advantage in that is that you work in lots of different environments with lots of different people. And you get that experience, and you kind of learn from each other, and you can bounce things off of each other, but you also get a very real idea of how the real world works. And sometimes I don't know that the certifications, you can get that technical ability, but again, you still got to transcend that cert into a working knowledge and
Yeah.
understanding of how things are done in corporate America.
Yeah.
And I think in that regard, they tend to fall short a little bit. But that's my own little personal spiel. Like, again, you can make what out of it, whatever you'd like.
No, no, I agree. I think getting experience in a business environment is crucial to helping your career grow or you grow in general. Because
Yeah,
you don't,
yeah.
there's no certification out there, there's no degree path that's going to teach you what a business environment actually entails. Like there's nothing, and every
Yeah,
business
it's
environment is
kind of
so
like, I
different.
mean,
So
it's the trial by combat. I mean, they just throw you out there, and you sink or swim, and you learn and you adapt. Um, and then again, certifications have its place, but there has to be a healthy balance with it. Too much of one thing and certainly not enough of the other, isn't
yeah,
necessarily good. There's got to be a good balance. So,
yeah,
but,
no, definitely. Well, like I said, that's all I got for you, man. So I really appreciate your time. I really appreciate you doing this. It's awesome.
oh no, I'm glad to do it. And like I said, if hopefully you'll find it helpful, and
Oh yeah.
maybe then you'll have me back.
Oh yeah, for sure. I would anytime you want to come on, and if there's like a specific topic that you want to talk about, I mean, we could definitely do that. If you want to talk about Azure sometime, I'd love to have you
I,
back on and talk about Azure.
hey man, I'll
All
share
right.
what I know. First, I got to learn a few more things, but
Yeah.
certainly,
Yeah.
until it's expensive, I can tell you that.
Yeah. Right.
Right.
Awesome. All right. Well, I'll get a hold of you, and I'll let you know when this gets published, and I'll shoot you like an email if I have any questions about anything.
All right,
So
man. Good deal. Thank you.
awesome. Thank you, sir. You have a great day.
All right, same to you.
Thanks, man. Bye.